Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our U.S. Senator John Hoeven.
Thanks to all of you for the nice welcome. More importantly, thanks for being here for the State of Energy for this summit. This is something that we want to do every year. Craig was kind enough, and the Fargo-Moorhead Chamber kind enough to agree to partner and really develop something that we want to do on an annual basis focused around jobs. The idea is that this event should be an annual event focused on jobs. And this is the first year. Craig really came up with the idea, but he said, how about starting out with energy and technology? And with all the exciting things that are going on in North Dakota, with all the exciting things that all of you are doing in North Dakota, that absolutely is the place to start. So thanks so much for being here and being part of it. But this really is an effort that we want to undertake on an ongoing basis to have a summit focused on jobs. America is the country of opportunity, and that means good quality jobs. And certainly the energy sector here is leading the way, but really the energy sector here is leading the way forward nationally. If we can just get this country doing what North Dakota is doing in the energy patch, it would mean incredible things. It would mean not only more energy that would help the rest of our economy grow, it would also mean more energy that reduces our dependence on foreign sources of energy and increases our security, and most important, it would mean more jobs for America. So the concepts that we built and developed here are very much the concepts that I'm trying to get put into law in Washington, D.C. and create the same kind of environment there that we worked so hard to create here in North Dakota, and that all of you have been a huge part of. So again, my thanks to Craig Whitney and to all of you for participating in this summit, the State of Energy. Now, given that I'm the after-lunch speaker, I have to start with a story. You always have to have a story. You get lunch and you give a story, and then you all settle in, and I'll give a talk, and they'll turn the lights down a little, take a little siesta, and then you'll be ready to go for the rest of the afternoon. So this is a story I kind of liked. I hope you do too. I ran across it on the internet, and it caught my attention because it's about California and North Dakota. And it's entitled, Why California Has a Deficit and North Dakota Doesn't. That's got to be a good story, so I grabbed that right away. Why California has a deficit and North Dakota doesn't. And it's about the governor of California and the governor of North Dakota. Not necessarily the current governors. We're not going to use any names in the telling of this story. Why California has a deficit. They have billions in deficit, and why North Dakota doesn't, and we have billions in surplus. The governor of California is out jogging with his dog on a nature trail. A coyote jumps out. The coyote then attacks the governor's dog and bites the governor of California. What does the governor do? Well, in California, number one, the governor starts to intervene, but reflects upon the movie Bambi, and then he realizes he should stop. The coyote is only doing what comes natural to coyotes. Number two, he calls animal control. Animal control captures the coyote and bills the state $200 testing it for disease, and then $500 for relocating the coyote. Number three, the governor calls a veterinarian. The vet collects the dead dog and bills the state $200 for testing the dog for diseases. Number four, the governor goes to the hospital and spends $3,500 getting checked for diseases from the coyote, and also gets his bite wound bandaged. Number five, the running trail gets shut down for 6 months while Game and Fish conducts a $100,000 survey to make sure that the area is free of dangerous animals. Number six, the governor spends $50,000 in state funds to implement a, quote, Coyote Awareness, end quote, program for residents of the area. Number 7, the state legislature spends $2 million to study how to better treat rabies and how to permanently eradicate the disease throughout the world. Number 8, the governor's security agent is fired for not stopping the attack and for also letting the governor attempt to intervene. Number 9, additional cost to the state of California, $75,000 to hire and train a new security agent with additional special training regarding the nature of coyotes. And number 10, PETA protests the coyotes' relocation and files suit against the state. Well, that's California. Now in North Dakota. North Dakota. The governor of North Dakota is jogging with his dog along a nature trail. A coyote jumps out, attacks the dog, bites the governor. What does the governor of North Dakota do? Number 1, the governor shoots the coyote with his pistol and keeps jogging. The governor has spent 50 cents on a 45 caliber ACP hollow point cartridge. Number 2, the buzzards eat the dead coyote. And that is what they do in North Dakota, and that is why North Dakota is a surplus. Probably should stop right there with my speech. Well, the story's fun. Hopefully you enjoy it. I kind of got a kick out of it. But you know what? It really does emphasize a very important underlying point, and that is we need a common sense approach to government. We need a common sense approach to government. I think we do that in North Dakota. Look, there's always more to do, and so we continue to work to improve and build it. But when you look at our national economy, and when you look at a lot of states around this country, they really need to get back to a fundamental, down-to-earth, common sense, simple, straightforward, understandable approach to business that empowers private investment. That's not complicated stuff, but that, more than anything, is what is needed to get our economy going. If you look at the national unemployment rate, more than 9%, and it's been that way for more than 2 years. Our deficit, $1.5 trillion. Our debt, closing on $15 trillion. We borrow 40 cents of every dollar that we spend. Our national debt is growing $4 billion a day. Our GDP growth in the second quarter, GDP growth this past quarter was 1.3%. The quarter before it was 0.4%. This is supposed to be a recovery. We have 14 million people unemployed right now. But the reality is we can change it. And we can look here at home and see that it is absolutely possible. Talk about some of the statistics here in North Dakota. Our unemployment is 3.2%. We have one of the fastest growing economies in the nation. We have the lowest number of foreclosures in the nation. We have a budget surplus, and we're actually reducing taxes while funding important priorities for our citizens. If you look at the first chart there, that lays out the comparison and shows that building the right kind of approach, we've sustained that low unemployment rate over time. We've gone from a state that was losing population to a state that is gaining people. I like to say, not by gaining people that live here as part of their job, but bringing people in to work as well, as you know very well, in this community. We did that by working very hard to have a strategic vision, a strategic approach that was focused on jobs. Now, it wasn't a big, long mission statement that took you a half hour to say it, and it didn't change over the past decade, and it hasn't changed now with our new administration. It is about creating the best possible business climate that we can, and that's something you have to work on all the time. It doesn't change. Growing our job base. And in developing our strategic plan and working on that job vision and that job focus, we also targeted industries for growth. Industries where we have natural advantages, where we can compete in a global high-tech economy and be very successful. And of course, as you all know, because you're a big part of it, energy is right at the top of the list. And it's been very important for us to diversify our economy in North Dakota. We've always been an ag-based state. We always will be an ag-based state. It's incredibly important. Our farmers and ranchers are doing a tremendous job. It is our #1 industry, and will continue to be. But we need a broad range of jobs in energy, value-added agriculture, in technology-based businesses, in tourism, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and other areas. We really want to continue to create more opportunity, increase our standard of living, and our quality of life. And if you look around North Dakota when we talk about energy, now let's go to this next slide. From border to border, you can see that we are truly growing in the energy patch, whether it's coal, ethanol, biodiesel, oil and gas, wind, hydrogen, and other areas. These are just some of the different projects that have been developed around the state. There are many more developing, and we've left obviously a lot off. For example, you won't see any of the oil wells, although we show the Bakken, the area of the Bakken formation. But the important point is that we're truly developing energy in all its different forms across the state of North Dakota. And that's exactly what we need to do as a country. We're in the top 10 in coal production, of which we export 60% of the electricity we produce. We're now the 4th largest oil and gas producing state in the country. And we passed up states like Oklahoma and Louisiana. And when I tell people that, it really surprises them. And so it's fun. But I'll tell you one thing that's really changed. You know, when I used to be outside North Dakota very often, somebody would say, well, where are you from? And you say North Dakota. And what would they say? Oh, it's cold out there, right? I'll tell you what, 90% of the time now, that's no longer the case. When somebody asks me, well, where are you from? And I say, well, I'm from North Dakota, they go, wow, there's really a lot going on up there. And you guys are really doing well. And you have a really financially strong state, or a surplus, or you're gaining jobs, or that's the kind of questions they ask about North Dakota now. And you know, we've got to continue that same focus, and we've got to build it at the national level. And you know, I'm going to take just a couple minutes and review Empower North Dakota. I know that all of you know about it because most of you here helped build it. But I think it's important because it's that same approach that we're going to need in Washington, D.C. if we're going to be successful in building the kind of climate for energy development nationally that we have here in our state. Empower is North Dakota's a comprehensive approach. It's about developing all of our energy resources, but it doesn't pick winners and losers. Instead, it's got all of our energy resources, both traditional and renewable, working together. For example, we work to partner our electric utilities with wind developers because they had some common objectives. And both Ron Harper with Basin and Chuck McFarland with Watertail are here, and they could tell you about those efforts in great detail. Coal utilities were willing to expand their portfolios with renewable energy sources, wind combined with natural gas. Wind producers were looking for infrastructure to get their products to market, so both needed more transmission. As a result, opportunity for real partnerships. We also help partner our coal-based utilities with biofuel producers to reduce costs and increase efficiencies. For example, waste steam at the Coal Creek Power Plant near Underwood is now used to produce ethanol, transportation fuel, for our country at a very, very low cost. Also, we're doing it with better environmental stewardship. If you look at the Thorolton ethanol plant right near here, right near Fargo, and the Newmans are here, Russ is here, and I saw Harold earlier. They're taking gray water, essentially wastewater from the city of Fargo, and using it to produce ethanol. Wind, we have a number of people here that have done tremendous work in wind. We've gone from less than half a megawatt of wind energy now to more than 1,400 megawatts. And we've got plans for tremendous growth in wind as well. In the biofuels, which I mentioned, gone from 40 million gallons annually to more than 400 million gallons annually. And there's a lot more that we can do. Geothermal heating and cooling. Niles Risk is here with KLJ, and I think he'd tell you that there's tremendous growth in geothermal heating and cooling across the state. And I think some of you probably saw that recently GRE announced that they're now going to develop an ethanol plant as part of the Spiritwood ethanol complex east of Jamestown. They're not only going to develop a traditional ethanol plant, but they're also going to develop a second generation cellulosic plant as well. And that's the point I'm making. This development is continuing to move forward with the latest technologies and really lead in terms of energy development in the country. Oil and gas. All of you know that story very well because you were such a huge part of it. And, you know, I can remember back in 2000, when I was first governor, we talked with oil companies. What's going on? Why aren't you investing in the Williston Basin? At that time, you know, the companies that were here, for the most part, they weren't doing a lot of drilling, and in fact, a lot of them were leaving. The answer they gave us is, well, first they could get better returns elsewhere. The technology was lacking to produce oil economically from new formations, and companies were going other places in the world where they could extract oil less expensively. Second, the data on confirmed reserves was also lacking, and the technology to produce oil from shale really wasn't developed. Third, we had a limited and an aging workforce. And fourth, there were real transportation constraints as well. In other words, there were better places for the industry to go to earn a return. And that's what I mean about the importance of working with industry, working with business, and building the kind of business climate, the kind of legal tax and regulatory climate that encourages them to invest their shareholders' money, their money, and it's hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in new projects and new technologies that will produce this energy. And what? There is always a risk component to that, isn't there? There's a risk component because they're putting those dollars into those investments, and they got to know that they're going to get a return for their shareholders, or they're not going to have a company, or they're not going to have a job. So you've got to create an environment that encourages that investment. And we work very hard with all of you to take your ideas and try to do that. I saw Ron Ness here early on. He was one of the guys we talked to about an oil and gas research fund. Actually funded by the industry itself, but an oil and gas research fund that helped put dollars into developing this technology. We put tax incentives in place, a variety of tax incentives that encourage with horizontal drilling, carbon sequestration, that encourage the development of infrastructure to capture gas that we produce with our oils. We initiated a study with our oil wells. We initiated studies of the Bakken Formation through the North Dakota Geological Survey before the USGS study. The USGS did a follow-on study after, in 2006, the North Dakota Geological Survey had done their study on the Bakken. And of course, now we've gotten Secretary Ken Salazar with the Department of Interior to agree to do a follow-on study. And that's going to start October 1. And I think that's going to be helpful both in terms of energy development in the state, but hopefully that's going to be very helpful in terms of infrastructure development in western North Dakota, encouraging more investment by the private sector in hotels and restaurants and housing and all the things we need out there for our growing population, at the same time that the state and the federal government puts more dollars into public infrastructure for that growing economy and growing population base. We improved infrastructure out there all the way from 4-laning Highway 2 to this recent billion-dollar infrastructure package in the last legislative session. We created a pipeline authority. We're doing a lot more to expand pipeline and transmission, including railroading. And we also developed training and education at Wilson State College through our Centers of Excellence program. Formerly, you had to send your workers to Wyoming or maybe Oklahoma to get trained. And amazingly enough, sometimes we didn't get them back. And now a lot of that training is being done at Wilson State College. And again, as I look around the room, you were a big part of making that happen. This year, North Dakota will produce more than 120 million barrels of oil. As I said earlier, fourth most among the states, and we're hoping to close in on California here pretty soon. Well, you know, obviously there's a difference between what we do at the state level and what we do at the federal level. But I think the reality is this. The reality is we have got to follow the model at the federal level that we've developed here at the state level. And energy just is a tremendous opportunity for this country. As I say, not just in terms of energy development itself and all the important aspects that has to it, but because of our tremendous need for jobs and quality jobs. To that end, I have tried very hard to draw ideas from all of you and others, and to work to put those ideas into legislative concepts, and also to work with the agencies. I'm going to go to our next slide and talk about the regulatory environment for just a minute. Then I'm going to talk about some of that legislation and the legislative approach. This shows the cost of regulation. This chart shows the cost of regulation, federal regulations, in billions of dollars over the last 30 years. And the important point about that chart is you'll see that generally when that regulatory burden was low, our economy did better. And when that regulatory burden spiked, we went through periods of real difficulty. And if you look right now and see the cost in billions of dollars of the regulatory burden on our economy here in 2010, you'll see that it also correlates with an economy that is really struggling. Now, the point of regulation is to make sure that you provide reasonable protections. You make sure that people do things right. So there is a proper role for regulation. But regulation needs to be understandable, it needs to be straightforward, and it needs to be empowering. It needs to be empowering. In other words, both the regulation and the regulator should make sure things are done right. But at the same time, it should help us make those investments. It should help companies that want to develop new projects, that want to deploy new technologies, that want to make things happen, that want to put people to work. That's their role. And so when we look at this regulatory environment, we have got to find a way to rationalize it, streamline it, simplify it, and make it work. And that's both an administrative responsibility of the administration and a congressional responsibility in terms of the laws we pass and how they get translated into regulation. Not too long ago, President Obama gave a speech, and I'm paraphrasing, but in that speech he essentially said, we've got to look at all of our regulations, and we've got to make sure that they work. And the ones that aren't productive, the ones that are outdated, outmoded, that are a problem, rather than doing what they're supposed to do, we need to get rid of them, take them off the books, okay? So Senator Pat Roberts and myself wrote legislation. He's the primary sponsor, I'm co-sponsoring along with other senators, but essentially it's the regulatory responsibility for our economy. And the idea is that we just say, all right, President Obama, you've said we need to go through all our regulations with all our agencies, get rid of those that don't work, and make sure the ones that we have do work, do a good job, and empower business so we move our economy forward. That's the law that we're trying to get passed down there. And if you look at it, it's bipartisan, and it's doing exactly what the President said we need to do. But it's that kind of approach that we've adopted in North Dakota, I shouldn't say adopted, that we've had in North Dakota the last decade, that we need to get going in Washington, D.C. And I think this shows you very clearly what's happening right now with the regulatory burden. And you know very well from your own first-hand experience the impact that it's having on our economy. Because if you look at energy, and this is our next slide, this is just one example. But in energy, as in, and probably more so than in almost any other sector of our economy, this type of regulation has gotten so complex, so voluminous and confusing, that companies want to comply with it and do what they need to do to make sure that we're protecting our air and our water and doing things right. But it's gotten to be so complex and so confusing and so costly that they're not able to do it. So what happens? Instead of making those investments, in the new projects, in the new technology, again, investing hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to put people to work. What happens? They get sidelined. They stop. And when they don't make those investments, and when they don't move forward with those new projects, we not only don't gain jobs, we lose jobs. And that's exactly what's happening at the national level. And that's exactly why we've got to break through with the kind of legislation that will help us cut through regulation that doesn't work and put in place the kind of legal tax and regulatory certainty, the kind of legal, regulatory, and tax environment that will empower and encourage investment. I've got a whole range of legislation that I was going to go through to describe some of that. But I think you get the idea, and you know very well from the work that we've done here in North Dakota. But it's the same approach. It's the very same approach, the same building blocks that we put together for Empower North Dakota. One of the things you'll hear all the time at the federal level is that we need a comprehensive energy policy. You'll hear that a lot. We need a comprehensive energy policy. That is absolutely true. But when someone brings a comprehensive policy, says, here it is, let's do it all at once, the first reaction is everybody gets in there and starts looking at it, not only members of Congress and so forth, but all the different interests from all the different constituencies, and they say, there's so many aspects to it, well, we don't like this, or we don't like this, or we don't like that aspect. So I'm convinced that we're going to have to take an approach much like we did here in North Dakota, and that is that we take individual pieces of legislation that are the building blocks, and we put together as many of them as we can, and we build this thing over time. If you look at Empower North Dakota, we built that comprehensive policy essentially over 10 years. And I think it'll always be a work in progress. But we got the industry to come forward with others, with good ideas. We put those ideas into legislation, and we passed as much of it as we could in each session. And we're going to have to work hard to do that in Congress too. There's a lot of bills, there's a lot of pieces of legislation now that are good bills, good legislation. But the key is we've got to move them. We've got to move them through the House and the Senate and get them signed by the President. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work by the members of Congress, and it takes a lot of work with all of you to build the support to do it. But I'm confident we can. I believe there's a clear recognition on the part of elected officials, on the part of the industry, and really on the part of this country that we need to do it to move forward. And I think that summits like this, discussions like this, working together like this, collaborating like we have on Empower North Dakota, reaching out to our fellow business leaders in the other states, working with other members of Congress, we can do it. And I think it's vital that we do it for the future of our country. I want to express a special thank you to Eileen Campbell with the Marathon Company for coming up. Clarence Casalot had an illness in the family, had hoped to be here. Eileen, was wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for addressing us this morning. Marathon represents the caliber of company that all of you represent. It's so great to have you here. I can still remember, it has to be 6 years ago now. At that time I was in the governor's office, and some of the very top executives from Marathon Oil came in. And they were, at that time, planning to undertake an effort to see if they couldn't figure out how to tap into the Bakken Formation. Really hadn't been developed much in our state at that point. Continental was doing a few things. There were a few others. I don't know that EOG had gotten much going yet, but a lot of the players, Hess was up there with their gas plant and so forth. Mainly, the only real shale development at that point going on was in Richland County, Montana. And they were punching a lot of holes out in Richland County, but they hadn't gotten very far beyond it. And Marathon, Continental, Hess, EOG, and some others decided that, that they'd try to make this thing work. And I remember in the case of Marathon, they brought in some of their top people that had been working, I think it was in the North Sea, drilling under miles of water. on the ocean floor, and I thought, boy, if they can't figure it out, nobody can. But, you know, sometimes we forget. Sometimes things get going, and we forget how you build those things over time. And I think we're at that point in our nation's economy. We're at that point in the cycle in our nation's economy. I think maybe we've forgotten a little bit what made this country so great. This country is about freedom of opportunity. This country is about business. You know, it was started as a place where people could come and get their business idea, their business dreams going. And, you know, this country was the best place to do business. And we're making it way too hard to do business here now. We've got to make it easier to do business again, and we've got to understand that is the engine that drives the car. That's how we raise our standard of living and our quality of life. And we've got to get back to that basic. And with your good help, I know we will. Thanks so much for attending this summit. God bless everybody.